Compassion comes from the Latin word compati, which literally means to suffer with. In other words, the person's pain is your pain. The person's suffering is your suffering. Until you alleviate the person's pain, you are left with pain. Until you take away the person's suffering, you yourself, you are suffering. If I can put it another way, compassion, it is love backed by action. For those of you who are writing, it's love that is backed by action. It's not, oh, I appreciate you, I see your suffering. It's not that. It's an extra step of saying, I see your suffering, I see you are in pain, but I'm gonna do what's in my power to help you because your suffering is my suffering. Does that make sense, everyone? So in the context of what we're talking about, when we talk about Christ City, we want to be a compassionate church. We want to be a church where we have compassion on people, where we see other people's needs and we respond to those needs according to what God has given us. Okay, so let me give you a few reasons why we ought to be compassionate. A few reasons why every Christian, chaque chrétien doit gagner un cœur de compassion. Every Christian needs to have a heart of compassion. Number one, why? Because we serve a compassionate God. Raison qui fait chaque chrétien besoin de gagner un cœur de compassion, c'est parce que nous avons servi un Dieu de compassion. Look at Psalms chapter 86, verse 15. Here the author is talking about God, the characteristic of God. He is describing who God is, and the author says, but you, O God, you are a God full of compassion and gracious, long-suffering and abundant in mercy and truth. God is a God, it's not just he has compassion. He is a God full of compassion. His very essence, his very nature is compassion. That's the type of God that you and I, we serve. There's another verse in Lamentations chapter 3. Lamentations chapter 3, verse 23. It says, the Lord's acts of mercy indeed do not end, for his compassions do not fail. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. God has so much compassion. The Bible says that the compassions, not only is he a God full of compassion, they renew every morning. So every day you wake up, there's a renewing of his compassion. On Monday when you wake up, it renews. On Tuesday, it renews. The reason why you and I, we are still alive, we're not dead. The reason why the wrath of God has not eliminated us, it is because his compassions, they are new every day. This is why a lot of people, they come to me, Pastor Melky, I'm struggling in my relationship with God. I feel like there's a shame. I feel like I've done things that are not. God's compassions, they're renew every morning. No matter the shame, no matter the guilt that comes with what you've done, as long as you confess and you repent, his mercies, his compassion, they renew every morning. But there's a window, right? There's a window of time where his righteousness will override his compassion. But we're living in a time where God is renewing his compassion each and every day. Each and every day, his compassions, they renew. You know, I have my daughter. Man, my daughter is a handful. And guess what? Every time I feel like giving her a spanking, I think, I love this girl. My compassion is renewing towards her. The same thing for my son. No matter how bad he messes up, he can drop a cup of juice on the couch. No matter how bad my wrath may come against him, I'm gonna have compassion for Levi. I'm going to have compassion for Connie. And so this is what the author is saying. As a father has compassion for his children, so the Lord has compassion for those who fear him. No matter how many times we mess up, God is still willing to give us another chance. I'll give you one more chance. I'll give you another opportunity. I'll give you a chance. Because we serve a compassionate God. Look at Psalms 51, verse 1. It says, be gracious to me according to your faithfulness, according to the greatness of your compassion, wipe out my wrongdoings. Other than the compassion of God, we would have been doomed. We would have died a long time ago. Our souls would have been in the hands of the enemy a long time ago. But it is the compassion of God that sent Christ, right? This is why we said John 3, verse 16, for God so loved the world that he gave his only son. Out of the abundance of his love and his compassion, he gave. In other words, real compassion. Watch this, listen to this. Real compassion is love, but not just any love. It's love that gives. I love you, so I'm going to give you forgiveness. Husband and wife relationship, right? Your husband may do something wrong, or your wife may do something wrong. You don't want to forgive this person, but because you love them, because you have compassion, you are going to forgive them. You are going to say, it's okay, next time do it differently. You're not going to want to hold a grudge because of the compassion that you have towards your husband and your wife. We serve a compassionate God. Does that make sense, everyone? This God we're serving, if you forget everything, don't forget this. We serve a compassionate God. That's the first reason, right, why we should be compassionate, because we're serving a compassionate God. But the second reason, just as he is compassionate, he wants you and I also to mimic his compassion. Look at Matthew chapter 6, or Luke chapter 6. Verse 36, it says, you must be compassionate just as your Father is compassionate. I don't think it could be any clearer than this. Be compassionate just like your Father also is compassionate. There's another verse that's interesting that Jesus was talking to his disciples in Matthew chapter 9. Now, here's the context. The religious people of the time, to them, it was all about their sacrifice. Okay? And so this is what he says, go now, this is Jesus talking to them. He says, go now and learn what this means. I desire what? I desire compassion rather than sacrifice. Two things: sacrifice, compassion. Sacrifice, compassion. Sacrifice, fasting. I'm fasting every day. I'm doing all the right things. I'm praying. I'm coming to church. I'm going to Bible study. I'm going to Sispusis. I'm going to all types of religious activities. He says, you know what? Instead of sacrifice, why not do compassion? What was happening was that they were so immersed in their religion that they forgot compassion. In other words, they didn't have no problem going to the synagogue on a Saturday or on a Sunday or whatever time they went. But the widow or the poor person that was right next to them, or the orphan that was right there next to them, to them it was like church, 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 religion, 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 sacrifice, sacrifice, sacrifice. Jesus Christ says, I would rather compassion rather than your sacrifice. In other words, it's possible that your religion is so high, it's so up there, that you forget the most important thing, which is compassion. Compassion over sacrifice. And I believe Jesus is speaking the same thing to the religious leaders of today. When it comes to sacrifice And compassion, I desire compassion. Again, it's not that the other things are bad. It's if you do the other things and you don't do it with compassion, every religious thing you do, it makes no sense. Makes no sense. Do you remember the story of the Good Samaritan? The Good Samaritan is the story of a guy going from Jerusalem to Jericho, and then the guy they beat him up, and as he's on the floor about to die, the priest comes by, looks at him, and walks away. But the Good Samaritan had compassion. And by the way, Samaritans was not supposed to take care of a Jewish person because there was no link between a Samaritan and a Jewish person. You weren't supposed to do that. But it was the Samaritan that was the true neighbor because the Samaritan had compassion. Listen to this. Never forget this. Never get up to a point in your Christian life where your heart is hardened to the things of God or to the people of God. When there's no compassion, people's hearts are hard. You will see the homeless. And then you will have a plate full of food. You would rather get home and throw away the plate full of food and make an excuse that the person's gonna use the plate of food that you were about to give to them and sell it for drugs. It's an excuse because we've come to a place where our hearts are hardened. You won't care about the things of God. People could be dying in your city. Whatever. People can live all types of ways, and people are dying in sin. People are in sin. People are living in the city, but we're so focused on the Sunday morning. We're so focused on coming and being in our own little hole that we forget that there's a dying world and people need Christ. And when that happens, God is saying, I have rejected your sacrifice because I would rather compassion. I say this because before starting Christ City, I said one thing. I said, Lord, I don't want our hearts to be so hardened and for us to focus on a religious activity that we forget what truly matters. Those who don't have the means to take care of themselves, orphans, widows, the needy, the homeless. Let me give you the benefits of compassion. Let me just finish here. Pastor Melky, what is the benefit of compassion? What benefit is there to being compassionate? I want you to look at this verse, and before giving you this verse, the story is told of a young married couple who just got married, and they're about to go on their honeymoon. And as they're going on their honeymoon, they get into a bad car accident. And so they get into a bad accident. The woman, she is badly hurt, badly injured, and she's on the brink of dying. But the man, he wasn't hurt that bad. So what he does, he says, man, I just got married. I need to save her. There's no hospitals around. But good thing for him, there was a hospital right across the corner from him called Compassion Hospital. He said, oh my God, Lord, you have been good to me. There's no other hospitals around, and you made that I get into a car accident, and there's a hospital right there across the street, less than 10 yards away. God, thank you. And so he goes, he takes his wife, or his newlywed wife, he takes her to the hospital. It was a little small home hospital. It wasn't a big hospital. It was a home hospital called Compassion Hospital. He knocks on the door, and then the little man answered. The little man says, how can I help you, sir? He says, I'm sorry, doc. I'm sorry to be knocking on your door at this time. The only thing is I have an emergency. Me and my wife, we just got into a car accident. She's about to die. Can you just help her, please? If you don't help her, my newlywed wife, she's about to die. And Doctor looks at him. Doctor says, I'm sorry, son. I'm a retired doctor. I don't take care of patients anymore. Wait, doctor, what do you mean? You must remember something from your career as a physician. You must remember how to put on a Band-Aid. You must remember first aid. You must remember something. Doc, my wife is about to die. I'm sorry, son. I can't help you. I don't practice medicine any longer. You have to take her somewhere else. The doctor closes the door and leaves him to his own. But before the doctor closed the door, as he's walking away with his wounded wife, he says to the doctor, if you're not going to take care of the sick and needy, you see that sign that's in front of your door? Take it down. It's a misrepresentation of who you are. You're marketing something that you don't offer. It's the same thing from the church. If we have a sign that says church in front of it, if we have a sign that says Church of God's, Church of this, Church of that, if we call ourselves church and we're not taking care of the needy, we're not taking care of those who need it, we're not taking care of the poor, we're not taking care of the orphans, then why do we have the sign in front of the church? It's an organization, it's a group, it's anything but a church. And so when we do that, it's a misrepresentation of God and of the church. If we're not taking care of the needy, if we're not taking care of those in need, of course, we're not going to be able to take care of everyone, right? I think that goes without saying. We can't take care of everyone's needs, but there's a minimum effort that every church should do in order to take care of God's people. I have desired compassion over sacrifice. Church is here to have compassion for those who cannot, to be a helping hand to the needy. Benefits. You know what? I didn't know this verse existed. It says, one who is gracious to a poor person lends to the Lord, and he will repay him for his good deed. Oh, I don't know if the church understands how powerful this is. In other words, let me have you understand it. When you give to the needy, you become the bank and God becomes the borrower. Let me say it again. When you give to the needy, you are a bank that is lending to God. I don't know about you, but if I'm going to lend to somebody, I'm going to want to lend to the Lord because he's good for it.